The stage lights caught the bruise that hadn't quite faded. My violin trembled in my hands, not from fear, but from the 11 years I'd waited for this moment. The microphone was already live. 250 parents holding their breath in the auditorium. He charged onto the stage, bourbon sick and furious. But I'd already decided tonight. This entire town would hear the only words that could bring down his kingdom of lies. The rosin on my bowstrings sang against the tension. This wasn't about hitting back with fists. This was about papers, cameras, and an audience that was slowly, deliberately, rising to their feet. My name is Elena Voss, and I hadn't set foot in Cedar Falls, Michigan for 11 years. The Delta flight touched down at 4:30 p.m. on a Thursday that smelled like old snow and regret. I pulled my violin case closer as I walked through the terminal, the weight of the document box in my other hand more psychological than physical. Inside that box lived the ammunition I'd spent over a decade collecting property deeds dated 12 years ago, conditional transfer clauses with my father's careful signatures, photographs of bruises mapped like constellations across teenage skin, receipts for heirlooms sold without permission. The rental car still had that chemical new smell that couldn't mask the familiar rot of returning home. Cedar Falls hadn't changed, same strip malls bleeding into farmland. Same water tower with Vikings Forever painted in fading purple. But the house on Maple Drive had transformed into something unrecognizable. My father Mark's workshop had been torn down, replaced by a gaudy deck that screamed new money nobody actually had. The garden he'd maintained with military precision now choked with weeds. Even from the street, I could see the mortgage company's notice tucked behind the screen door. My phone buzzed. Grandmother Ruth's voice crackled through. "You need to see this with your own eyes. Elena, the funeral's tomorrow, but that's not why I called you back." She didn't need to elaborate. We both knew Rick Daltrey had been circling like a vulture since the moment my mother remarried him 8 years ago. The gambling debts, the borrowed family treasures, the way Mom's signature started appearing on documents she'd never seen, it was all part of his ecosystem of control. I parked 3 houses down, an old habit from the bad years. Through the living room window, I watched my mother Lydia moving in that careful way I remembered, each gesture calculated not to disturb, not to provoke. Rick's silhouette passed behind her, bourbon bottle in hand, even at 5:15 p.m. The document box felt heavier as I lifted it from the passenger seat. Inside, between the photos and receipts, lay the centerpiece of my return, a co-ownership agreement from 12 years ago, when Dad was still alive and I was 20. He'd insisted on adding my name to the deed with a specific military service protection clause, something about preserving family assets for veterans and their children. Dad had seen men like Rick before, smelled them coming from miles away. I also had copies of the forged signatures, courtesy of 3 different handwriting experts. The pawnshop receipts for Dad's Purple Heart, his service revolver, the guitar he'd built by hand, the casino surveillance footage timestamps matching our bank's withdrawal records, the recorded voicemail where Rick, drunk enough to forget consequences, admitted he'd signed what needed signing to get his hands on quick cash. But paper trails don't make people listen. That's why I'd orchestrated something bigger. Tomorrow's funeral would gather the family, but next week's annual winter recital at Riverside Youth Conservatory, where I'd once been their star student and where I now served as a touring artist liaison, would gather the entire community. 250 parents, teachers, and students. All those phone cameras, all those witnesses. The front door opened. Mom stood there, 53 years old but looking 70, her hands wringing the dish rag like it might absolve something. Elena. Just my name, but it carried everything: accusation for leaving, relief at my return, fear of what came next. Behind her, Rick's voice boomed, "Well, well, the runaway decides to grace us with her presence. You here to play your little fiddle at the old man's funeral?" I smiled, the kind of smile I'd learned in courtrooms and concert halls, professional, impenetrable, dangerous. "Something like that," I said, shifting the document box to my hip. I'm here to play. The house reeked of bourbon and lies. Rick stood in the doorway like he owned more than just the fraudulent papers in his filing cabinet, shoulders squared, gut hanging over his belt, that particular swagger of a man who'd never earned his confidence. At 6'2", he still tried to use his height like a weapon, forgetting I wasn't the 17-year-old girl who'd fled this house anymore. You gonna stand there all night, or you coming in? He didn't move aside, forcing me to brush past him. The smell hit harder up close: bourbon, stale cigarettes, and that peculiar sourness of someone rotting from the inside out. Mom had retreated to the kitchen, her default sanctuary. I followed, noting how Rick had colonized every space his bowling trophies replaced Dad's books, his deer head mounted where Mom's paintings used to hang. The bathroom door stood open, and I saw it, his razor on Dad's shelf, his medication bottles lined up like soldiers, that shower curtain with the Confederate flag pattern he thought was heritage. Coffee. Mom's voice barely registered above a whisper. Sure. I set the document box on the counter, watching Rick's eyes track it like a predator sizing up prey. What's in the box, princess? He leaned against the doorframe, bourbon sloshing in a tumbler that used to be part of my grandmother's crystal set. Memories, I said, accepting the coffee cup with hands steadier than my heartbeat. He laughed, ugly and wet. Memories don't pay bills. Speaking of which, you planning to help your mother out, or you just here for the free funeral food? I excused myself to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. The mirror showed what 11 years had built: steadier eyes, a straighter spine, calluses from violin strings that could also come from fighting back. I pulled out my phone, photographing everything: his pills, oxycodone, probably illegal, the threatening notes he'd tucked behind the mirror, the bruise on my neck from where his greeting grip had been just a little too tight. They joined the archived photos from years past, the ones showing purple-black marks across ribs, handprint bruises on upper arms, split lips explained away as accidents. When I opened the medicine cabinet, looking for aspirin, I found something else: Mom's sleeping pills, nearly empty though the prescription date was only a week old. Back in the kitchen, Rick had helped himself to my document box, pawing through papers with thick fingers. What the fuck is this? Those are copies, I said calmly, recording video on my phone from my pocket. The originals are with my lawyer. His face went from red to purple. Lawyer, you threatening me in my own house. Dad's house, actually. His name's still on the deed, his and mine. Has been for 12 years. The tumbler shattered against the wall, crystal fragments catching light like bitter stars. Mom flinched, but didn't turn from the sink. You little bitch, you abandoned this place. You don't get to waltz back. I left because you broke my ribs. My voice stayed level, professional. The emergency room records from 11 years ago are quite detailed, as are the photos the nurse took. Did you know the hospital keeps those forever? I pulled out a specific paper from the box, a bank statement showing suspicious withdrawals, each one matching casino timestamps. But what's really interesting is this signature on the home equity loan. Mom, did you know you apparently signed for $70,000 last month? Mom finally turned, her face pale. What? Don't listen to her. Lydia, she's trying to. I had 3 handwriting experts examine it. I laid out the documents like dealing cards. It's not even a good forgery. Rick. You can see where the pen pressure changes, where you traced from her driver's license signature. His fist slammed the counter. Mom jumped. I didn't. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice carrying the same clarity I used to cut through orchestras. Next week is the winter recital at Riverside. 250 parents, school board members, community leaders. You're going to attend. Rick, you're going to sit in that auditorium while I perform. Like hell, And when you inevitably lose control, because we both know you will, especially with an open bar at the reception, everyone will see exactly who you are. Every phone camera, every witness, every mandatory reporter in that room. I gathered my papers, leaving only the copies behind. The sheriff's department already has my protection order application. My lawyer has the fraud evidence, but I'm giving you one chance to leave quietly. Sign over your fraudulent claim to the house, pay back what you stole, and disappear." Rick's laugh came out strangled. "You think you're so smart? I think I'm done being afraid?" I looked at Mom. "The funeral's at 10 the recital's next Friday at 7 your choice which one becomes his finale." The law office of Jonathan Pierce occupied the second floor of Cedar Falls' only historic building, above the coffee shop where Mom used to take me after violin lessons. Pierce had been Grandfather's attorney and friend, the kind of small-town lawyer who knew where all the bodies were buried, metaphorically speaking. Elena Voss. He stood as I entered at 8 sharp, extending a hand that had signed 1,000 documents protecting families from men like Rick. "Your grandfather said you'd come back eventually. He left instructions." The conference table was already covered with papers. I added my box to the collection, and we began building Rick's legal coffin nail by nail. First, the co-ownership deed from 12 years ago. Pierce pulled out the original. "Your father was smart. The Military Service Protection Clause means Rick can't touch your portion even if he somehow legitimized his claim to your mother's half. You served with the Army Reserve musicians, that counts." I spread out the pawn shop receipts. He sold Dad's Purple Heart, his service pistol, the Martin guitar Dad built by hand. "Theft. If we can prove your mother didn't consent." Pierce photographed each receipt. "And this signature analysis. 3 experts confirmed forgery on the home equity loan." "Look." I pointed to the overlays. "Mom's real signature has a distinctive loop in the Y of Lydia. The forgery missed it completely, and the pen pressure analysis shows tracing patterns." Pierce whistled low. "This is wire fraud if it crossed state lines. Bank fraud either way." "What about the casino?" I pulled out the crown jewel printed screenshots from the casino's player rewards program, showing Rick's losses over 3 years. 87,000 in documented gambling losses. Every withdrawal from Mom's account matches his player card activity within 2 hours. Financial elder abuse, potentially. Pierce made notes. "Your mother's only 53, but with the medication you mentioned, we could argue diminished capacity due to coercion." We worked for 3 hours, building parallel cases, criminal fraud for the prosecutors, civil recovery for the assets, and an emergency protection order for immediate safety. Each document was copied, notarized, and filed in triplicate. "Now, about the recital," Pierce said, leaning back. "You're planning something." "I'm planning to perform violin." I kept my voice neutral. "If Rick happens to lose control in front of 250 witnesses, that's his choice." Pierce smiled like a shark. "I'll make sure Sheriff Davidson has deputies nearby. You know, for traffic control." At noon, I met with Naomi Briggs, the conservatory director, in her office overlooking the performance hall. "Elena, you were our brightest star." She embraced me warmly. "When you called about performing at the recital, I was thrilled. But this other matter, I need the security cameras operational, audio and video recording. We always record the recitals for the archive. I mean the high-definition system, every angle, and I need the main microphone hot from the moment the doors open." Naomi studied me carefully. "This is about Rick Daltrey. Isn't it I heard he married your mother?" "You've heard more than that, I'm sure." She nodded slowly. 3 parents have mentioned seeing him drunk at school events. Mrs. Patterson said he tried to sell her a violin he claimed was his to sell your father's violin. She recognized it. "Can you help me? I'll do more than that." Naomi pulled out her phone. "We have a parents' safety committee. Let me make some calls." By 3 p.m., the framework was in place. The sheriff's office had the fraud documentation and would be, coincidentally, increasing patrols near the conservatory next Friday. The recording system would capture everything in 4K resolution. The parents' committee would ensure strategic seating retired military near the stage, medical professionals on the aisles, teachers with mandatory reporting obligations and clear sight lines. I stopped at the bank next, where the manager, Thomas Chin, pulled up 3 years of records. "These withdrawals, they're all just under the reporting threshold. 10,000, 9,500, 8,700. Classic structuring pattern. Can you freeze the accounts? With the protection order. Yes. The moment it's signed. My final stop was the courthouse. The emergency protection order application was 23 pages of documented abuse, financial fraud, and credible threats. The judge, Harold Brennan, had known my father. Mark Voss was a good man, he said, signing the temporary order. This will be active immediately. Mr. Daltrey will be served within 24 hours. The full hearing is set for Monday, after the recital. Thank you, Your Honor. Elena. He stopped me at the door. Your father would be proud. Using the system, not your fists. That takes real strength. I thought about the violin calluses on my fingers, the way they'd hardened over decades of practice. Sometimes strength was knowing exactly where to apply pressure and when to let the music play. The conservatory's main hall filled with the sound of young violinists finding their harmony. I stood at the podium, my father's violin warm against my shoulder, leading them through Pachelbel's canon, simple enough for the students, complex enough to showcase discipline. The morning's dress rehearsal drew an unexpected crowd. 40 parents had shown up to help with logistics. From the top, everyone, remember music is conversation, listen to each other. I raised my bow, and 32 young musicians followed. The cameras were rolling, microphones hot, every angle covered. Naomi had outdone herself. During the break, Mrs. Patterson approached with a worn photo album. Elena, I thought you should see these. She flipped through pages of garage sales, all dated within the last 3 years. Your father's tools, his workbench, that beautiful oak cabinet he built. Rick sold everything, said you'd given permission from wherever you were touring. I photographed each page. How much did he get? Maybe $3,000 for items worth 20 times that. He didn't even clean them first. Your father's Purple Heart was in a shoebox with old batteries. Her voice cracked. I bought it. Couldn't stand to see it sold to strangers. She pressed a small box into my hands. Dad's metal, polished and preserved. For after you handle this properly. 3 men approached next, all wearing subtle military pins. Miss Voss. We heard Rick's been claiming service in Afghanistan. Bronze Star, the works. He was never military. I confirmed. Stolen valor. The tallest, introducing himself as Colonel James Wright, retired, looked disgusted. We'll be at the recital. Front row, if that's acceptable. More than acceptable. By afternoon, my phone had 37 messages from family members responding to my carefully worded email about the situation with Mom's husband, cousins, aunts, Dad's old army buddies all confirming they'd attend Friday's recital. The performance was selling out for the first time in the conservatory's history. I found Mom sitting alone in the back row, watching the children practice. She'd aged a decade in the 3 days since I'd been home. He was served this morning, she said quietly. The protection order. He threw things, screamed about conspiracy, about ungrateful women trying to destroy him. Where is he now? His brother's house. Drinking, probably. She turned to me with eyes that had finally found their fight. I signed those papers you left. The revocation of power of attorney. The bank accounts are frozen. Mom, I knew. The words fell between us like stones. About the gambling, the forged signatures. I was just tired. So tired. It was easier to pretend. And the bruises. Those too. She touched her wrist, where fading yellow marks wrapped like a bracelet. But when he sold your father's things, claimed they were his to sell, I should have called you then. I sat beside her, our shoulders touching for the first time in 11 years. We're ending it Friday. How? By letting him be himself in front of everyone who matters. I gestured to the hall. He won't be able to resist making a scene. Not with an audience, not with me performing. His ego won't allow it. She smiled, small but real. Your father always said revenge is best served with witnesses. That evening, I sent the final email to the parents' committee, copying school administration and select media contacts. Dear friends, This Friday's winter recital will feature enhanced security measures due to an ongoing domestic situation. Please be assured student safety is our top priority. Security and medical personnel will be on site. The performance will proceed as planned. We appreciate your understanding and support. Sincerely, Elena Voss and Naomi Briggs. Within an hour, the parent network had mobilized. The high school football coach would bring his entire defensive line to help with chairs. The head of emergency medicine at Cedar Falls General would attend for his nephew, along with 6 trauma nurses. The local news station confirmed they'd cover the recital as a community interest story. I practiced until midnight, my fingers remembering every piece I'd play Friday. The Bach partita that Dad loved, the Brahms that made Mom cry. And for the finale, something special, a composition I'd written called Truth in D minor, built around the sound of things breaking and being rebuilt. My phone buzzed at 12:45 a.m. Rick, from his brother's number. You think you're smart? You think you won? I'll be there Friday. Try and stop me. I screenshotted the threat, forwarded it to Pierce in the sheriff's department, then returned to my music. Every note was a thread in the web I was weaving. Friday night, Rick would walk right into its center, and 250 witnesses would watch it close around him. The auditorium hummed with anticipation at 6:45 p.m. Every seat filled, some people standing along the walls. 250 witnesses, maybe more. The stage lights caught the polish of my violin, the same instrument Dad had gifted me at 16, the one Rick had tried to sell. Mrs. Patterson had saved it, kept it safe, and now it would sing the truth. I wore the blue dress Mom had saved from my first professional performance, altered to fit the woman I'd become, not the girl who'd run. My hands were steady. The microphone at center stage gleamed silver, already recording. From behind the curtain, I watched Rick stumble in at 7:05 p.m., bourbon-bowled and fury-faced. He'd violated the protection order just by being here, but that was expected, calculated. He shoved past the football players at the door, ignored Colonel Wright's steady gaze from the front row, and sprawled into a seat in the center section. Perfect sightlines for every camera. Naomi took the stage first. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's performance features our former student turned professional violinist, Elena Voss, returning home to premiere her new composition. Applause rippled through the crowd. I stepped into the light. The first piece was Bach's Partita No. 2 in D minor, the Chaconne, 15 minutes of absolute focus, my fingers finding every note while my peripheral vision tracked Rick. He shifted, muttered, pulled out a flask despite the disapproving stares around him. Between pieces, I spoke to the audience. This next selection was my father's favorite. Mark Voss served 2 tours in Vietnam, built furniture with these hands, and taught me that strength isn't about force, it's about endurance. The Brahms Hungarian dance filled the space with wild energy. Rick's agitation grew visible. His foot tapped wrong to the rhythm. His breathing got louder. When I hit the false ending, that moment of silence before the music explodes back, he started to stand, thinking it was over. "Sit down," someone hissed. He dropped back, face reddening. I was 3 minutes into my original composition when he snapped. The piece included a section where I played near silence, bow barely touching strings, forcing the audience to lean in. That's when Rick's voice cut through. "Fucking show-off, bitch, just like her father." I kept playing, but lifted my head to look directly at him. The cameras captured everything. He stood, stumbling over legs, pushing toward the aisle. "Think you can humiliate me with your lawyers and your papers?" My bow never stopped moving. The melody continued, eerily calm against his rage. I made that house worth something. I supported that pathetic woman for 8 years. Colonel Wright and 2 other veterans stood, not approaching but forming a barrier between Rick and the stage. Parents pulled their children closer. The football team moved to block the exits. Rick reached the stage stairs. That's when I stopped playing and spoke into the microphone, my voice carrying clear, "Rick Daltrey, you're violating a protection order. You're intoxicated at a children's recital, and you just confessed to fraud in front of 250 witnesses. I'll fucking show you fraud. He lunged onto the stage. Time slowed. His hand swept toward me, caught my shoulder, spun me half around. My violin flew from my grasp, clattering across the floor. Someone screamed, but I'd prepared for this moment, dreamed it, planned it. I didn't hit back. Instead, I let him push me toward the microphone and said, loud and clear, 3 years ago, you forged my mother's signature on a $70,000 loan. You stole my father's Purple Heart and sold it. You've withdrawn $87,000 from her accounts for gambling. Shut up! His hand raised again. The evidence is with the sheriff's department. The fraud case is already filed. The slap connected with my cheek, sharp and bright under the stage lights. The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot. Every phone lifted, every camera recorded. The local news reporter stood from her seat, signaling her cameraman. That's when the heroes emerged, not with violence, but with witness. 250 people rose to their feet in absolute silence. No one rushed the stage. No one shouted. They simply stood, phones raised, recording everything. Sheriff Davidson walked through the main doors at 7:32 p.m., right on schedule. He'd been waiting in the parking lot, listening to the live stream Naomi had arranged. Mr. Daltrey, you're under arrest for violation of a protection order, assault, public intoxication, and suspicion of fraud. Rick tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. A wall of parents, teachers, and children's protectors stood witness. The handcuffs clicked like a percussion finale. The number 8 restraints caught the stage lights as they closed around his wrists. I picked up my violin, checked for damage, just a scratch on the varnish. Fixable. Everything was fixable now. Ladies and gentlemen, I said into the microphone, my voice steady despite the red mark blooming on my cheek. Music is our sanctuary, not his battlefield. Shall we continue? The applause was thunder. The standing ovation wasn't for my performance, it was for all of us, for the community that rises when truth needs witnesses. The auditorium transformed into an evidence collection center within minutes. Sheriff Davidson directed his deputies with practiced efficiency while Naomi Briggs took the microphone. Students, please move to the rehearsal room with Mrs. Garcia. Parents, we need 30 minutes to process witness statements. Anyone who recorded video, please remain seated. I stood at the edge of the stage, holding ice from the concession stand against my cheek. Pierce appeared at my elbow, phone already out. The judge is standing by. We're filing the emergency asset freeze tonight. 37 parents formed a line at the makeshift statement station. The football coach's defensive line had become impromptu security, keeping media at respectful distances while witnesses spoke to deputies. Each phone video was uploaded to a secure cloud server, tagged with timestamps and contact information. Mrs. Patterson approached with her phone. I got everything. The threats when he entered, the confession about the forgeries, the assault. It's all here in high definition. Behind her, 3 more parents showed their recordings from different angles. The news crew had captured a wide shot. The conservatory's security system had recorded multiple viewpoints plus crystal clear audio from the stage microphone. 52 separate recordings so far, Deputy Morris announced at 8:15 p.m. This might be the most documented assault in Michigan history. Pierce was on his 3rd phone call. Yes, Your Honor. The suspect explicitly admitted to the $70,000 fraud? Correct. On microphone before 250 witnesses. Yes, we have multiple recordings. Within 20 minutes, the emergency orders were signed immediate asset freeze, expedited fraud investigation, and bail set at $100,000 cash, no bonds accepted due to flight risk and gambling addiction. The county prosecutor, Janet Reeves, had driven straight from dinner when she heard, Miss Voss, we're charging him with felony fraud, assault, violating a protection order, public intoxication, and disrupting a school event. With this evidence, he's looking at 3 to 7 years minimum. What about my mother's money? The asset freeze is immediate. Every account he has access to is locked. The house is protected under your co-ownership. Your mother's accounts are being restored to her sole control tonight. I found Mom in the lobby, surrounded by other parents offering support. Someone had brought her tea. Another woman held her hand. The community I'd fled had become her fortress. "The bank called," she said, voice stronger than I'd heard in years. "Everything's frozen. He can't touch another penny." At 8:45 Naomi gathered everyone back in the auditorium. "Folks, what happened tonight was unfortunate but necessary. This community protected one of our own. Now, our students have prepared their pieces, and I think we should let them perform." The children returned, wide-eyed but determined. As they took their positions, I addressed them from the stage. Sometimes standing up to bullies means using your voice, not your fists. Tonight, you all learned that. Now, let's fill this space with something beautiful. The students performed brilliantly, their young faces serious with newfound understanding of how communities protect each other. Parents live-streamed the performances, comments flooding in from around the country. The story was going viral. But for the right reasons. Pierce pulled me aside at 9:30 p.m. "Rick's brother just called my office. He wants to make a deal full confession in exchange for minimum sentencing. No deals on the fraud charges. He pays back everything. And if he can't, then he serves the full sentence. Mom needs that money for her retirement, for the house repairs, for the life he stole from her." As the recital concluded, something extraordinary happened. One parent stood and began announcing resources. Cedar Falls Women's Shelter has counseling available. Another, the credit union, can help with financial recovery counseling. A third, my law firm will handle the civil suits pro bono. The community had become a living document of support, each person a witness not just to violence but to recovery. By 10 p.m., the auditorium had emptied except for core supporters. Colonel Wright approached with his veteran group. "Miss Voss, we've recovered your father's service items from various pawn shops. Everything will be returned." The news reporter requested a statement. I kept it simple. Domestic violence thrives in silence. Financial abuse depends on isolation. Tonight, 250 people said, "No more." That's the story. Mom and I walked to the parking lot together, our breath visible in the December air. For the first time in 11 years, she stood straight. "You did it," she said. "You ended him without throwing a single punch." "We did it," I corrected. With 250 witnesses, the sheriff's department confirmed Rick would remain in custody through the weekend. Monday's hearing would formalize charges. The mountain of evidence would bury him in legal consequences that bourbon and rage couldn't escape. Justice had been served at 7:32 p.m., witnessed by a community, documented in hundreds of hours of footage, and sealed with handcuffs that caught the stage lights like a final cymbal crash. The courtroom filled by 8:45 a.m. Monday morning. Judge Brennan presided, his expression grave as he reviewed the mountain of evidence. Rick sat at the defendant's table in Orange County jail clothing. His bourbon courage evaporated into hangover pallor. His court-appointed attorney, a young public defender named Sarah Mills, looked like she'd drawn the shortest straw in legal history. "Your Honor," Prosecutor Reeves began, "I'd like to present People's Exhibit A through M13 separate video recordings of Friday night's assault." The first video played on the courtroom monitor. Rick's voice boomed through the speakers. "I made that house worth something. I supported that pathetic woman for 8 years. Then the slap, crisp and undeniable in high definition. Several jury pool members, present for another case, gasped from the gallery. Exhibit N through our bank records showing systematic fraud over 3 years, including forged signatures on loan documents totaling $70,000. Pierce had submitted everything: the handwriting analysis, the casino records, the pawn shop receipts. Each piece of evidence landed like a hammer blow. Rick shrank smaller with every document. "Your Honor." Sarah Mills stood, clearly uncomfortable. "My client wishes to address the court. Mr. Daltrey, you're advised against self-incrimination," Judge Brennan warned. Rick stood anyway, swaying slightly. "This is a setup, that girl. He pointed at me. She orchestrated this whole thing. Entrapment. Mr. Daltrey. The judge's voice could freeze bourbon. Are you claiming you didn't assault Miss Voss in front of 250 witnesses? She provoked me. By playing violin at a children's recital? By humiliating me by spreading lies? Prosecutor Reeves stood. Which lies specifically? The forged signatures our experts verified. The gambling losses documented by casino records. The stolen military honors 3 veterans confirmed you never earned. Rick's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. Furthermore, Reeves continued, your statement Friday night, "I'll fucking show you fraud," constitutes admission of guilt. You knew you'd committed fraud. You announced it publicly. The judge reviewed his notes. Mr. Daltrey, the evidence against you is overwhelming. However, I understand you wish to negotiate a plea. Sarah Mills stood quickly. Your Honor. In exchange for a guilty plea to assault and 1 count of fraud, we request minimum sentencing and rehabilitation for gambling addiction. No. My voice carried from the victim's section. Your Honor, may I address the court? Miss Voss, you have that right. I stood, my notes prepared but unnecessary. The words came from 11 years of silence breaking open. Rick Daltrey systematically destroyed my mother's financial security. He stole and sold items of irreplaceable sentimental value, my father's Purple Heart, his handmade furniture, family heirlooms spanning generations. He forged documents that could have cost my mother her home. This wasn't impulse or addiction. This was calculated predation. I pulled out a final document. This is a notarized statement from Mr. Daltrey's ex-wife in Nevada, describing an identical pattern of financial abuse ending in bankruptcy. He's done this before. Rick erupted. You fucking bitch, you can't... The gavel cracked. Mr. Daltrey, 1 more outburst and you'll be held in contempt. Your Honor, Pierce added. We're also filing civil suits for full restitution, $87,000 in gambling losses, $70,000 in fraudulent loans, approximately $30,000 in stolen property, plus damages. Judge Brennan's expression darkened as he calculated, Mr. Daltrey, you're facing felony fraud charges with special circumstances, assault, violation of a protection order, and potential federal charges for forging signatures on bank documents. The plea offer is rejected. He continued, given the evidence, I'm binding this over for trial. Bail remains at $100,000 cash. Additionally, I'm signing orders for immediate restitution of all recoverable assets and garnishment of any future earnings until full restitution is made. Your Honor, Sarah Mills tried. My client has no assets. He has a truck worth $15,000, a boat worth $8,000, and a Harley-Davidson motorcycle worth $12,000. I provided the registration documents, all purchased with my mother's money in the last 2 years. Seized for restitution, the judge ordered. Deputy, coordinate with asset recovery. Rick's face went from red to purple to white. You can't take my bike. I can and I am. Furthermore, Mr. Daltrey, upon conviction which seems inevitable given this evidence, you'll serve consecutive sentences for each forged document. That's a minimum of 12 years. The courtroom fell silent except for the court reporter's keys clicking. However, Judge Brennan continued, if you allocate fully admit everything, provide all documentation of your crimes, and agree to permanent separation from the victim's family, I might consider concurrent sentencing. 5 to 7 years, with restitution as a condition of any future parole. Rick looked at his attorney, at me, at the judge. His kingdom of lies had collapsed in less than 30 minutes of court time. I need to speak with my client, Sarah Mills said weakly. Court will recess for 15 minutes. In the hallway, Mom took my hand. Is it over? Almost, I said, watching through the window as Rick's attorney explained his choices: admit everything and get 5 years, or go to trial and get 12 to 20. Pierce smiled grimly. He'll take the deal. Bullies always fold when the spotlight's on them. The conservatory stage glowed under the same lights that had witnessed everything 3 nights ago. It was 9 p.m., the official continuation of the winter recital. But this time the atmosphere thrummed with triumph rather than tension. Every seat was filled again. The same 250 witnesses had returned, plus more who'd heard the story. Rick was gone, locked in county holding after taking the plea deal. 5 to 7 years, full restitution, permanent no-contact order. He'd signed it all with shaking hands at 4:30 p.m., his signature nothing like the ones he'd forged. I stood at center stage with my violin, the scratch from Friday night still visible but worn like a badge of honor. The microphone was on, the cameras rolling, but tonight they captured something different. 3 nights ago, you all stood up, I said to the audience. Not with violence, but with witness. You became the reckoning my family needed. Behind me, the youth orchestra had assembled. These children had learned something beyond music. They'd learned that communities can be instruments of justice. Tonight, we finish what we started, not with confrontation, but with celebration. The first piece was Bach again, but this time uninterrupted. Each note rang clear. No bourbon-slurred curses to break the spell. Mom sat in the front row between Colonel Wright and Mrs. Patterson, her back straight, her eyes clear for the first time in years. Halfway through the Brahms, Sheriff Davidson appeared at the back door not for an arrest, but to listen. He'd brought the court clerk who'd processed the protection order, the bank manager who'd frozen the accounts, the prosecutor who'd built the case. They stood along the wall, part of the community that had answered the call. During the intermission, Naomi took the microphone. I've directed this conservatory for 15 years. I've never been prouder than I am tonight. We didn't just witness justice, we participated in it. The crowd erupted in applause that felt like healing. For the finale, I played my composition again, Truth in D minor, but added a coda I'd written that morning. The new ending transformed the piece from breaking to rebuilding, from revenge to restoration. The last note hung in the air like a promise kept. Then something unplanned happened. Mom walked onto the stage. She'd never performed publicly, but she took the microphone with newfound courage. 8 years ago, I lost myself, she said simply. Friday night, this community helped me find my way back. The house is safe. The accounts are restored. The fear is gone. She turned to me. Elena, you didn't just come home for a funeral. You came home to resurrect something that man tried to kill our family's truth. The youth orchestra stood and began playing Ode to Joy without prompting. One by one, audience members rose to their feet, not in alarm this time, but in celebration. Parents hugged, children danced in the aisles, and somewhere in the back, someone shouted, "Welcome home, Elena." As the music swelled, I saw Rick's empty seat from Friday night had been taken by a young girl with a rental violin, her mother beside her signing up for lessons. The cycle of violence had ended, the cycle of music continued. Pierce appeared at the stage stairs with an envelope. The house deed, transferred fully to your mother's name. The fraudulent loans are void. Insurance will cover most of the stolen items' value. But the real victory wasn't in the paperwork. It was in watching Mom laugh with neighbors who'd become protectors, seeing students understand that strength meant standing witness, knowing that Rick's prison cell was smaller than the fear he'd once trapped us in. At 10:15 p.m., as people began to leave, they stopped at the donation box Naomi had placed by the door, not for the conservatory, but for the local domestic violence shelter. By the end of the night, they'd raised $12,000. The news crew conducted final interviews. When asked how I felt, I gave the only answer that mattered. 11 years ago, I ran from this stage in fear. Tonight, I stand on it in freedom. That's what community justice looks like. The last person to leave was Colonel Wright. He pressed something into my hand, Dad's Purple Heart, now in a proper display case. Your father would be proud. You fought the war he trained you for, just not with weapons he expected. Mom and I walked out together, past the spot where police had cuffed Rick 3 nights before. The handcuff marks on the floor had been buffed out, but we knew they were there like justice, invisible but permanent. The conservatory lights dimmed behind us. In 3 days, Rick had fallen from tyrant to prisoner, from predator to cautionary tale. But more importantly, a community had risen from audience to army, from bystanders to protectors. The violin case felt light in my hand as we reached the parking lot. Inside it lay the instrument that had sung truth to power, accompanied by 250 voices that refused to let violence have the last note. Rick thought the stage would be his battlefield. Instead, it became his courtroom, his confession booth, his final curtain call. The applause that night wasn't for my performance. It was the sound of a community clapping closed the door of his cell, conducted by a violin that refused to stay silent. The stage lights went dark, but the truth they'd illuminated would burn forever in the memory of Cedar Falls. Sometimes the best revenge isn't playing dirty, it's playing music while justice keeps perfect time. Thank you for listening to this story of courage, community, and justice served cold under hot stage lights. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect across the miles. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more tales of truth triumphing over tyranny, and share your own thoughts about standing up to bullies with the power of witnesses rather than fists. Your stories matter too.